Yeah, I have felt that sensation weirdly enough. I've felt that while doing podcasts, particularly when there's a guest that I feel like is maybe a little bit above what I'm asking them to do. I would probably consider you that also, but when when someone agrees to come on my podcast and reward my listeners for what they listen to from me week after week, I do sometimes have that sensation like I'm listening to the conversation, and so that third person is like, you could run out of questions at any moment. You could run out of things to, like, why aren't you listening to this person talk? Why are you thinking about me right now? You're not going to know what he just said.
Yeah.
And like once or twice, I even have had that situation where I just kind of watched myself just hit a wall and run out of questions, forget my line of questioning. And I've even had to admit to the other person one time, like, I have sort of asked everything I wanted to ask a little bit early at like 19 minutes. And is there anything else you wanted to talk about? And the guy couldn't have been more pleasant about it. But I mean, you've had that happen probably on stage at some point, or lost a line of thought or something. I mean, what do you even do in that moment?
No, I think you answered your own question beforehand, because I think that's something which is so important, is that kind of honesty in those moments where those sorts of things happen. Like when you asked me the question and then I answered half of the previous thing and then didn't even remember what the question was just a minute ago. Like, I think that like it's very human and relatable to make mistakes and just get things wrong. And that is totally fine. We all know what it's like. It's a real kind of like equalizer. It balances things. And and we all know as well, like, for example, in an interview and something like this, no one's going into it thinking, kind of, I know what I'll do. I'll have just enough questions. So the last 10 minutes, I will not have enough. And then it'll be an awkward silence. It's like no one's winning there. No one's premeditating that situation. So I think that, and a lot with kind of interview situations and just generally kind of talking and getting on with someone and kind of creating a connection. It's like you don't want to be too wooden. You don't want to kind of be too scripted. You don't want to end up in a situation where you're like, no matter how like well crafted your questions or your kind of insights are, that you haven't left enough space for whoever it is that you're kind of engaging with. Because I mean, like, I remember when I was first doing interviews, like music interviews, band and things like that, I would like beforehand, I would like literally have a list of questions. I'd be trying to memorize them. I'd be trying to, make them seem as clever as possible. Sort of like I would go, if there was a, musician who kind of like had a solo project that they did before they were in their famous band, I would kind of like somehow find a way to ask a question about it and throw it in there, just and not even to learn anything, just to sort of like say to that person, I know what I'm talking about and I've done my homework. Yeah, exactly. And I think it was just like through over time, just realizing that my favorite parts of them just, came from the times when someone let the mask slip, when someone made a mistake, usually me, when someone kind of, just dropped the ball, or just kind of it went off onto a tangent that was completely unexpected. All of these sorts of things, they were always the most fun moments. They were always the parts which I remembered, and afterwards was kind of like, damn, that was good. That was so fun, And so instead I started trying to find situations where I could artificially create that, and since then it's just been so much more fun.
Yeah, there's a lot to, I think that was probably the mistakes I was making early on, was that over preparation and that sort of, if I'm going to survive this, I have to adhere strictly to this plan I came up with. And you can't, like you said, you can't plan a conversation, unless you're going to plan it for both sides, and then you're not going to get anything interesting out of the other side. So I think that probably is the killer mistake, is coming in too prepared, or not at least ready to adapt on the fly,
Yeah, it's so natural, though. I think it's such a natural way to react to these sorts of things.
Yeah. And I mean, the improv background has to help in your, basically everything you do. How did you get started in that?
Yeah, it does. And it's a fun thing. Like, improv is actually probably the type of performance or comedy, like musically and like in comedy and stuff like that, that I'm most naturally suited for. Because I'm an awful planner. I, cannot think of more than 5 minutes in the future, seconds maybe. So, I do react so much better in the moment. And like, and at first I took up stand-up. That was my first thing that I took up. And I kind of, put it off for so long because there was like a part of me that knew that even though I'd like gone down the line with like getting an education in IT and a background of things like that, I was the class clown. There's a part of me that was like, even if I'm not performing well in certain aspects of my life, I know I'm funny. I know I can kind of, be witty and make people laugh and things like that. It wasn't like a thing I was consciously thinking, but it was there in the back of my mind. Mm-hmm. And there was always perhaps, I think, a fear. I didn't realize this until I did it, of actually doing something comedy related, because, I was very serious with my musical endeavors. That because I was scared that if I ended up being bad at this, that like it would completely like destroy my core understanding of who I was. Like, it's like there's this, you got all these kind of hang-ups on yourself about a personal level, but it's like there's this fundamental thing. You're kind of like, well, whatever happens, at least I'm funny, okay? And so I got involved in stand-up, and I've got to admit, it's like there was like some things would go well, but like, I was really conscious for the first year or so that I was like, this is not working, I'm like, I cannot translate the things in my head to the stage. Or if I'd have like a good show, it would be so inconsistent. I could like follow off with one which just felt so amazing with something that was just like so devastatingly awful that I wouldn't be able to sleep for hours afterwards. I'd just be lying there in bed staring at the ceiling, just like going, that's another way in which I just completely embarrass myself in a room full of strangers. There's all those sorts of thought processes. So it wasn't until I got involved with improv, and it just kind of happened so much more naturally, just right from the beginning. I took a course in Australia with a group called Improv Mafia, and it was just so natural, like it just, I wasn't trying. I wasn't having to kind of, overthink things or go against some of my natural instincts. I would just so happily just be in the moment and just kind of, and just adapt to whatever new reality we're in at that time, whatever someone says. It's kind of, I guess it's kind of how I get on with a lot of my friends in general anyway. Someone will just go off on a tangent. I don't sort of stop and say, just hold a second. You said that we're on a bus, but we're actually both sitting on the sofa right now. So I'm just wondering if maybe you've had some sort of mental episode, or if you're trying some sort of hypothetical scenario here as to what's actually going on. That's not what happens. It's just like a fun thing of just always kind of like just talking nonsense and just, and having fun with just like, letting your imagination run wild and those sorts of things. So yeah, improv is just as soon as I started that, as soon as I discovered that, I was just like, yeah, this is, I wish I'd done this sooner.
Yeah. And I've always kind of considered myself a comedy nerd. And like one of my biggest regrets is not having just made the time, even while working and doing all the same things you're having to do to keep things going, making some time to actually get involved in a local like improv group or anything like that. Even now, I mean, I'm sure because you're about to teach one. I mean, there are online, improv groups right now doing their thing over Zoom. I'm sure it's not quite the same, but it's something. And even during the last year, I haven't managed to, just do it for fun, hang out with a group a little bit. And I'm sure it feels better. You kind of mentioned the difference between a good show and a bad show, good night, bad night. I'm sure it feels a lot better when you're doing something that you find doesn't work, but you're basically playing a game with your friends, which is in many ways what improv seems to be. I'm sure that feels a lot better and you don't have that same trouble sleeping, right?
Precisely. Yeah, exactly. Yeah, I think that's exactly it. Because with improv, yeah, it's just a very in the moment. Some things work, some things don't. And yeah, if it doesn't work, the scene ends. You carry on, and it's just like a very spontaneous frame of mind. But I wouldn't beat yourself up over these things, because like I was saying, with like getting into comedy myself, I've always had these hang-ups, so that things that I'm kind of like, I should really do that, and I just put them off, and like just keep putting them off, and there's like this monolithic thing at the back of my mind that I'm not addressing. It could be important, it could not, but yeah, there's all of these sorts of things. If there's something you want to try, I don't know, usually it's kind of like just don't overthink it.
Yeah.
Like if you do want to try this sort of thing, then I'm a big fan of just like sort of spontaneously going like, I'm online, I've booked it, oh no, it's too late now. I've bought the tickets, and now I have to go.
Yeah.